So I have a friend in Arizona and he sent me a link to this marketplace ad for this 2003 Mustang Cobra. The car had been sitting for 3 years at a mechanic shop because it came in with a blown head gasket. The mechanic diagnosed the car quickly, told the owner what it needed, and the owner left and never came back. So that's kind of interesting. It's not every day you hear about somebody abandoning an '03 Cobra. Now, this story does sound all too familiar. There was one that was just like it, '03 Cobra Red Fire convertible, that was left here in town in a storage unit when the guy who owned it started parting out the things like the engine and stuff he could get money out of because he couldn't pay for the car, and then he ended up not being able to pay for the storage unit fees, so he left the car and never came back. Now, I have a whole story about this car on the channel. I'll put that in the link in the description or at the end of the video where you can watch it if you'd like to. But basically, that car was left in the storage unit and became property of the storage unit. And the owner of the storage unit gave it to one of his workers. He said, clean out that unit, you can have the car that's inside. But the guy got kind of scared that he'd never be able to get a title or anything for it, or the owner would come looking for it, so he just parted it all out. My friend bought all the pieces, and then when we got there, the pieces were the only thing left, like these pieces here that you could see, and the wheels and the IRS and stuff like that. And he had chucked the T56 in a dumpster. And the reason he did that was because he was scared. He wanted to get rid of the car, and then he took a Sawzall and cut the car up into pieces and threw it away. So unfortunately, that '03 Cobra is gone. But here is another example of a red fire convertible '03 Cobra that has been abandoned. So the shop owner said he had the key of the car and it had 101,000 miles on it or so. And these are the pictures he had on the listing. And you can see it has Alaska license plates. I thought that was very interesting. So I asked my friend up in Alaska who has a Sonic Blue Terminator Cobra. He bought it brand new up in Alaska. I asked him if he knew about this car because there can be very many of them up there from Alaska, and you would think that people up there would know about them. And he said he'd ask around, but he never really got back to me. I don't think he found anything. But I thought that was weird that there would be a car with Alaska plates down in Arizona and it would be left like that. Now looking at the car, it's hard to tell in pictures, but the convertible top actually looks pretty good. And the '03-'04 Cobra got a different kind of top than the normal Mustang convertible would have had. So it's a little bit nicer of a top, a little more durable, I believe. But if you look, you can kind of see the trim around the top is a little bit faded from being out in the sun. But overall, the car looks pretty good. Smoked taillights, it looks like it has an exhaust system. And I think it was just a pulleyed Cobra at that point, although my friend in Alaska asked if it had a Kenny Bell supercharger on it because he might have known about it. But anyway, looking more at the car, you can see it actually has some damage to it. Chin spoiler is a little banged up. There's something hanging from it, like tape or something. And the front fender has a little bash in it in a couple places. But other than that, it doesn't look too terrible. It does have aftermarket hood vents that we might be able to see better in a different picture. But here you can see the rear side scoop is missing the horizontal vent that would be specific to the Terminator Cobra. Not sure why that's gone. It almost looks like there's some quarter panel damage there too by that back wheel. So maybe the scoop got popped out or something happened to it. But there is some writing on the windshield. That's kind of weird to see. And then on this side you can see a little bit better detail of those aftermarket heat extractor hood vents. And it does have a Cobra snake in the grille, which would have been changed from the running pony that all the '03 Cobras came with, '04 Cobras as well. All the Cobras came with the running horse. Headlights are faded over. It looks like the pods for the fog lights are kind of discolored from being out in the sun a little too much. And it does have the spare tire on the front driver's side. Now, side note, that spare tire is specific to the Cobra, the Mach 1s, and the Bullet, because it has to have a bigger dish to fit the 13-inch brake caliper to fit around the brakes, and so that is a Cobra specific spare tire. Now the owner of the shop said that that front wheel is in the trunk of the car. It just had a flat tire, so that's why the spare is on there. But overall, good looking car. Still has the folding mirrors, still has the spoiler, the rear bumper, like everything's there. And it's just interesting that somebody would leave the car. And so my friend who had sent me this said he had actually seen the car driving around town a few years ago. And so there's all sorts of things you can come to an observation or a conclusion about. Just say, sounds like the guy just didn't have the money to fix it, and so he just left it there. Maybe the guy disappeared. It's possible the guy even passed away. But the shop owner was upset that the car was still there after 3 years and said it's time to sell this thing as parts because he didn't want to deal with trying to get a title for it. And so he listed it for $5,000 as is, no title, and you could buy it for the parts. Now, there's a lot to consider in that. Some people I talked to were saying, well, what right does he have to sell the car? It's not really his, and that's kind of the first thing I said about it too. I just thought, well, how can he even sell it? It's not his. Now, if he had a mechanic's lien on it, if he had worked on the car and they didn't pay for it, then he would have the right to get the title to the car. Or he could have a sheriff come and do an abandoned vehicle thing with it and maybe get the title that way. There's ways to get the title to the car if it's been abandoned for a certain amount of time. And maybe the police could find the owner and contact them and stuff, and maybe the person didn't even know that the guy was just going to try to sell the car the way it was. But anyway, it was very interesting that he was trying to sell it that way. Now, with a blown head gasket, the cylinders are most likely full of rust, like the GT that I had saved, another silver GT that had a bad engine in it with a blown head gasket, sat for a year. There was so much rust in the cylinders I couldn't even turn the crank. And so there would be some things like that you'd have to consider if you were going to try to fix this car. Say you did get the title and everything. But other than that, you would have so many good parts. Obviously, saving the car would be the number one priority. If you couldn't get a title to it no matter what, and somebody was able to get the car, they would have everything they needed: T56, wiring harness, transmission mounts, ECU, cluster, key, like everything you would need to make a '03 Cobra clone, and then just build an engine for it, So there was potential there. Now, I would like to see the car saved. But anyway, my friend got really interested when I showed him the car, and so he asked for the details, and I was able to get the shop's name, and my friend inquired on the car because he wanted to go buy it the way it was, and the shop owner at that point had taken the listing down, and he said that a towing company has now come and taken the car. So maybe the guy got a little bit worried that he was going to get in trouble for selling something that wasn't technically his. I don't know what the deal was, but basically that's the last I heard of it. So you might see this car turn up at an auction sometime. You might see it come up as parts for sale. It'd be nice to see it be fixed and back on the road one day, because it really wouldn't take too much. I mean, an engine is a pretty big deal, but for a Terminator Cobra to survive, that would be worth it to some people to get that car back on the road. So anyway, I just thought this was a kind of a cool story, and I thought I'd share it with everybody. These kind of conversations I have with my friends, and what they had said, the shop owner had said about the car and why it was there, and just kind of very interesting story. So this is something you don't see a lot, and I'm kind of intrigued with barn finds, and it's kind of fun to hear about a Cobra that's been sitting somewhere like this for years, and luckily nothing's been stolen off of it at this point. But anyway, pretty cool story. Hopefully we find an answer to all these questions. But thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and stay tuned for more Mustang content.